Today we're going to kind of bounce around a little bit through our trip, but try to give you the best highlights. And so this is actually our trip down to Normandy. So this was about 3 days in after we arrived, and anyway, it speaks for itself. So there were these flyovers the entire day. We were in St. Mary-Cleese, and this is just one of them, but there were 5 or 6 of them that were there that day, and it was just deafening. Airplanes don't sound like that anymore.
Vintage
Really
Mustangs.
amazing. And so as you can tell, in a minute you'll see a picture. There were about 20,000 people there that day, and everyone was dressed in vintage military or vintage clothing, and they all have their Jeeps and different things, and it was amazing. I mean, we felt like we were in 1944.
Once we came out in our uniforms, we pretty much got stopped every 3 steps to take a picture.
And this is our view from the stage from our show that day. We had a few numbers that we got to do, and as you'll see, the crowd was fantastic. It was probably the most fun show I've ever done personally, as far as the crowd and the energy and just feeling like we were exactly where we were supposed to be, exactly when we were supposed to be there. It was just incredible.
I think also the view from our standpoint of seeing everyone dressed and then looking out and seeing the church. So the church that's there to the right, and this is where the paratroopers came in. This was one of the first towns that was liberated during the invasion, and where the paratrooper got stuck on the steeple, and he hung there through the entire battle until they could get in to get him off. And so in commemoration, they have a little guy hanging, not a real guy, but like a dummy guy hanging there off the steeple, which is really cool.
So the men in the background, this is the barbershop chorus that we were touring with. Yep. They made a fabulous backdrop for us, however many guys it was. I don't even remember how many, 120 gentlemen in their matching suits and striped ties, and then you've got these 3 girls who come out and sing in front of them. It was great fun.
Right.
Yeah, so this gentleman you'll see driving us around, we weren't supposed to be on a vehicle. We were supposed to walk in our 4-inch heels through the parade. We decided we didn't like that idea, so we talked our way into this Jeep, and he's a lovely man from Britain. And I think his name was Keith. And he's like, okay, jump on. And so we got a ride through the parade. It was wonderful. And we got much closer to the vets because of that, which was amazing. That was Lieutenant Mel. He was from Michigan. He was 94, I think. 93. And he was wonderful. And just to see the vets so excited and full of energy. I mean, they're waving, having the time of their lives, being center stage and loved and adored. And when people come up to them, whatever language they spoke, they came up with thanks and tears in their eyes, just wanting to shake their hand or have them sign a program or a T-shirt. And some of them you knew were like generations down from their parents or grandparents who actually lived in that occupation. So it was beautiful. And then we're talking about the vets. We got stuck in we couldn't find the parade at first, which was funny. And all the people were going, this way. And so we were following all the pointers, and then we finally found the end of the parade, and we got stuck there for a while. And which was wonderful because we had vets in front of us with their families and behind us with their families. We had an adorable little man on a Scottish vet on his moped behind us, and he was bound and determined not to give up his spot because he said it was the best view in the parade. And when we were stopped, we got to sing a cappella for these vets. And it was so personal, and it was very beautiful. And
well, and I think also what happened for me, I had this moment, and I'll back up a little bit. We were prepared for this trip to be emotional, but I don't think we were prepared for the gravity of the emotion and for it to be literally 14-hour days of breaking into tears in public in front of people because of who we're meeting or the ground that we're standing on or the visual that we had from stage. And then all of a sudden we'd have to be like, get your stuff together because you got to sing now. And so, we're in this highly emotional state in these historic places that you read about in books, and then meeting these veterans who lived through this. And every single veteran that we met said, I would be back next year to come to the commemoration again. And you're just like, oh my gosh, you're 93 or 95, And so as we were standing there, standing in the back of the Jeep, and we were just waiting. We had to wait for about an hour and a half before the parade actually started, and, that we started moving. And people would walk up, and of course, you're recognizable. There's 3 of us in the back of a Jeep in WAC uniforms. You are the Andrews sisters. And if you aren't, all those people are going to be very disappointed. And so... So we were. And so what was great is people would gather around the Jeep. And I'm talking, there's hundreds of people that are standing around us on this street, and you'll see some more pictures in a minute. And people would get so quiet, we would start singing. And we were singing a cappella, and you could hear a pin drop. And we're standing in the middle of a street, in the middle of this little village, and people just completely singularly focused. And as a performer, you always think about how your music or your craft, how that impacts people that are around you. And I had this moment standing in the back of the Jeep that was really profound for myself. And that was what the veterans who were there at that time during any war, right? But being in a foreign country, not speaking the language, it doesn't look like these pretty pictures now, right? I mean, it's all rebuilt. Being away from your families, who knows how long you've been away from your families, and all the support staff, the Salvation Army and the Red Cross and all the other people who were there as well. And then here we are giving this gift of our song to these people who are standing on these streets, and to think of the USO performers who went and did that. And literally, they were standing in the back of a Jeep because there was no stage, there was no microphones.
Putting themselves in jeopardy to do it as well.
Right. And so I had this really profound moment of that hitting me as people were standing there, and how that experience must be when you are in that moment, when you hear the planes and the bombs. I mean, we hear the planes, but we're like, oh my gosh, look at the plane. But when you're hearing the planes and knowing that, is that my plane or is that somebody else's plane, right? And so it was very, that day specifically was extremely powerful and very moving, of having that experience in the back of the Jeep while we're waiting for the parade and then being on stage as well.
For me, it was just surreal. That was the most surreal day because it's just the French village you expect with the stone buildings and the shutters, and then to see the elderly people waving out their window and thinking they might have been there during that. And then there was one veteran specific who walked up to us while we were in the Jeep and said, hey, would you sing me a song?
Yes.
I'll try not to cry.
Absolutely.
Yes, we will. Which one?
So we said it would
list.
be our honor, and we sang Apple Blossom Time. And he stood there with his cane on the side of the street, tears coming down his face, and I'm thinking, how are we going to keep it together? But we did. We drew on his energy, and it was the most beautiful moment. And then 2 minutes after we were done, a Jeep pulled up on the side, and they're like, we got him a ride. And everyone cheered, and it was so wonderful. It was just a beautiful, beautiful moment.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of started this other video. Let's go back. Can I go back a little, Eric? Yeah, go back to the beginning.
We spent a lot of hours on a bus, chartered tour buses. So this is a little
And they're not
sample
as
of some of
comfy
our
as they say.
photos.
No, they aren't. I was very disappointed there was no Wi-Fi. I had 11 days of no phone. So it was an internet access, and so it was interesting. So this was our view for quite a while.
Often 8
That was
hours.
fun. Yes. And this is our bus driver. Can I tell you, the most amazing maneuverer
Skilled
ever.
man.
This parking job he did. Oh, and that's how we would actually save our seats. Just saying. We had to save our seats because they would disappear. But yeah, so our bus driver, we were in, what was it?
It was in Paris.
I think we
wasn't
were
it?
in Paris.
Yeah.
And
to Paris.
we had to park down under the building.
The bus garage.
It was his maneuvering. I can't believe he parked that thing with a trailer on the back. No
We
doubt.
held
It was
our
crazy.
breath. He had to go through these pillars, turn the bus between buses, and back into a spot. We held our breath, and we all gave him a standing ovation when he was done.
All right, so these are kind of pictures of us getting down to Normandy, and
Left in our lunch spots.
this is when it really hit us when we were on this bus. And then we started seeing all of the drivers coming by, carrying their military vehicles. And so something that really, really struck me was as we were driving down, and I'll stop it for just a second. As we were driving down, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get my camera out. And I saw these flags that were on the on houses and on businesses. And at first it was just like a house or two. And we're well out of Paris by this time. And then I realized that every house and every business had all the Allied Forces flags. And so they had the American flag, the British flag, the Canadian flag, and then the French flag. And it really, I had this moment of, wow, you know, you hear a lot in the States about, you know, how Americans are viewed around the world. And what I can tell you is that France loves us. And they love the Canadians and they love the British.
And I would say, 95% of the time, the American flag was highest, which shocked me. I was so surprised, which it was just really neat.
The lavender fields. Oh, you could tell just by the color of the field. They weren't in blossom at that point, which was probably good. Otherwise, I think I probably would have made the bus driver pull over. We didn't get to stop and frolic in the lavender fields like we wanted to, unfortunately. But we did have a fabulous view on our driving experiences.
Yeah. And so this is a picture. Here's the guy. He hangs there.
And the story is he got hung up, and he did get shot in the leg, I think, but he pretended to be dead. And the sad part is he watched the rest of his buddies get shot. But he was the only survivor from when finally the Allied forces got there and liberated the town.
These are just more selfies. We thought you'd want to see those. Here's a few more of the planes.
I like that one with the microphone in the frame. That was cool.
It was backstage.
So this is kind of the audience ended up moving up. They opened up the barricades. So let's talk about these guys real quick. This is the Alexandria Harmonizers. They're a 105-member, at least that's what they traveled with, men's barbershop chorus out of Washington, D.C. And they are the reason, essentially, why we went on this trip. And so to kind of give you a little back history, I have a friend who lives here who had moved to D.C., was performing with them, and then we started talking, and he was telling me about this opportunity that had come up. And so the chorus and us have been putting together this show that was supposed to happen last September, and then it didn't happen, and it was a World War II tribute and all of this that we would go out to Washington, D.C. and put on with the chorus. And so in the process of this, they were asked to then go and sing in Normandy, and they said, well, it would be really lovely to have you ladies with us. And so that's kind of the connection. They were asked by a group called Historical Tours, which I won't go into because it's a very long story, but these are our guys. So lots of times on Facebook, we'd have people be like, who's all the people on the back wearing the same tie? And we were like, oh, they're our backup singers.
We don't travel light.
No, so we were 4 buses with about 230 people traveling. And when we had the other performing groups with us, we were over 1,000 people traveling. It was insane.
There's the Scottish guy sitting there.
And we couldn't go, like Christine said earlier, 3 steps without photo, to the point where we had our show and spent the hour waiting in the Jeep for the parade to start.
No food.
And then the 2 hours of the parade and finding the vet's family again. And I had to pee so bad, right? And you can't do anything about it, except when we finally got where we needed to go, I beelined for the bathroom, and we had a crowd of people following us. Like, hold on, just one moment, you know, just. So they were waiting for us when we came out of the bathroom. So they did get their photos. And
followed us all the way through town.
We do like to think about how many images of us are out in the world from this day, you know, just how many millions of pictures and videos we were in, and it's really an overwhelming amount to think about.
Well, and I was I don't know why I was surprised, but we met people from everywhere, like around like every continent was represented in this audience especially. And so it was really, really cool to see and hear all the languages and to see all the people. And yeah, it was just really amazing. And then there's these big things. This is while we were waiting. And here's my friend with a stick, and we'll get to the stick later. And
Flyover.
So this right here, I know.
Out of context, I look ridiculous in this picture. I mean, really.
But this was us standing in the back of the Jeep, and this is when the 5 airplanes went overhead, and someone just happened to have my camera and was taking pictures, and it just, like I said, that sound.
Oh, it was amazing.
That sound of those propeller, like, we just don't have, airplanes that sound like that. And so I was like, oh, perfect. And then who doesn't want to take a picture of a whole bunch of men in kilts? Let's be honest.
Right? Or uniform.
So for the parade, that's when the larger contingency was with us. So there were 2 high school marching bands from the U.S. We were with 2 college marching bands. They're full color guards, blah, 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 blah.
Cadet Corps.
Cadet Corps. And so that's, I didn't put all of those people in there, but this was our view going down the parade.
People hanging out the windows and doors.
Hanging out the windows. And the flags up top are all the flags of the Allied forces. Yeah.
Coolest parade
coolest
ever.
Parade
Surreal.
ever. Yes.
That day alone for me was worth the entire trip with the amount of vets we saw and being a part of that celebration
And all
with
of
all
these
those people. Oh. St. Mary's.
This is all in St. Mary's. Yeah. So, and to let you guys know, and I had this conversation the other day with someone, in the United States, we view this as more of a somber moment. And so the stuff you saw on TV, and we were not at the stuff with the president and the queen and Putin and all that stuff, okay, just to clarify. And so, but we were 15 miles down the road in St. Mary-Glise when all of that was going on, and so it's portrayed very differently in media here in the U.S. This is a national holiday for France. They take this day off and they celebrate their liberty, and you see the word liberty everywhere, and they celebrate their freedoms that were given to them. And this was the turning point in the war, this day, June 6th, that essentially led down that path to give them their freedom. This is a celebration for them. So this isn't a whole bunch of somber walking around and, there's a lot of paying your tributes, yes, but this is also, we're living and, let's celebrate that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that hit me was like these people, they lived in their own country, in their own houses, their own farms, and they were occupied from someone else who didn't care, who had power to do whatever they wanted at any moment in time. And I don't think in America we've ever really had that. And so to see the people celebrating and so full of thanks and joy, and it hit me really hard. I think about realizing what that must have been like. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we do another drawing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll go.
Or are you going to the...
Oh, yes, that's my job.
Okay,
Amy's
get your tickets out. More arms, Amy, more arms.
9.
Do we have a 9? Number 9. Oh, yay!
We have a 9? Yay!
Suitcase number 1 or suitcase number 2? Or maybe it's 3. Number 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have won a war cake.
This is inspired, well, it actually is a recipe from 1940s. Everything's in there but the wet ingredients. And the lady who talked about it, that her grandmother made it, said that if you let it sit a day or two, it gets really moist and it's actually better if you can keep it that long, she said. So that we thought that was kind of fun, so experience that. So where are we going in Paris next? Or in France?
So, who knows what busking is? It's when then you see the performers on the streets, like on the 17th Street Mall. 17th? Where'd that come from? 16th Street Mall? Whatever.
Where are you?
Maybe. So busking is basically going out. We chose not to ask for money. We didn't want to get in trouble. So this is us at the Luxembourg Gardens.
We found that with all of the events going on and the dignitaries coming, that a lot of traffic kept us from certain locations. So a few of our shows got canceled, and we were really upset about that. The one in Luxembourg Gardens, they said was canceled, and so we said, let's go sing for them anyway. So we showed up, and some of the bands were there, and we were like, what? And they're like, no, it wasn't canceled. It's just the harmonizers chose not to go and move somewhere else. So we're like, well, we're here, and we're ready to perform. So we started there, and then we decided we would just go sing through Paris. And we found veterans, and it was wonderful.
So we went to Notre Dame, and you saw some pictures a little bit ago. We were in front of the Eiffel Tower, and it was really cool. And each place was a little different as to the kind of feel from the audience at the Eiffel Tower. Oh, here. That's me losing my shoe.
Oops.
And it was a holiday, so there were crowds everywhere.
And then this is what would happen after every little show we would do. The swarm would happen. So it was really cool. People from all over the place, and then just countries everywhere. And yeah, it was.
One of the best parts is while we were walking through Paris in costume and looking vintage, one person would walk by and people were like, oh, look. And then the next person matching would walk by and they'd go, what's going on? And then the third person and people would be like, what? And it was really fun.
On the train especially. All right, so let's just talk about this fourth person that you're like, who is this blonde lady? That's actually Michelle, and she was our tour manager, and we've got some Michelle stuff coming up in a minute.
Yeah.
But just to let you know who she is, so you're not
She's
like,
not here,
who is
so we
this
can tell you
person?
all the dirt on Michelle.
Exactly.